Hey there. So today I'm actually going to be re-interviewing a previous interviewee. I'm going to be talking to Rita Orlov from Post Curious. We actually chatted 2 weeks ago, right after she launched Kickstarter, and Instagram crashed when I tried to post it, and we lost everything. And so we're doing a nice just re-check-in for anybody that usually likes to watch later. Essentially, Rita runs a little business called, and I say little, she runs a very successful business called Post Curious, and she had just launched her second Kickstarter for a puzzle tale, which we'll talk about in a bit, called Emerald Flame, and it kind of went crazy. People were really excited about it, understandably, because I bought one as well, but it has way overblown her projected fundraising goal. And so now we're going to talk about the success of the first one. We're going to talk about basically some of her practices, how she gets creative, how she finds creative things. Pardon me, I have our cat right here, really wants attention. I'm going to disable the comments, but oh, hi from the Netherlands. I'm going to disable the comments, but there are questions. So if you want to ask a question, go ahead and do that. We'll be doing some question and answer session. We'll be talking about how to get creative, how to build kind of a puzzle tale, and we'll go from there. So let me start by knocking off commenting, and then let's bring in, here we go.
Hello.
Hey, hello again. Oh my
How are
gosh.
you?
Good, you have it in the background. I see it.
Yeah.
I see the Emerald Flame. Oh my gosh. Well, so we talked 2 weeks ago, right as you had launched the Emerald Flame on Kickstarter. I think it was like 3 days old, right? And your initial goal was to raise like about $30,000. And I think at that time you were at like 60 or 70. And so it was just like, okay, this is going well, and this is really great. Where is it now?
So we've gone from 200% last time we talked to 500%.
That is insane. And it says something, because I think for the most part, whenever and I see it with a lot of board games, right? Elon Lee, who I talk about, who's kind of the godfather of the alternate reality game, he runs Exploding Kittens, which is one of the more popular kind of new age board games. And I chatted with him just at lunch one time, and he talked about they just do Kickstarter now. Like most creatives do this because you don't have to go through like a publisher, and you don't have to do all this, right? Like you don't have to borrow money from someone that you owe. People basically just pay up front. Can you talk, you had done Tale of Ord, which we'll talk about in a little bit, which was your first kind of installment. Was Tale of Ord Kickstarter as well, or was that something different?
No, I basically put up my own money to make Tale of Ord, which was an enormous risk, but it worked out in the end.
So is this one with Kickstarter like this, it's a lot less risk, because you have people like me that you say, hey, listen, you're going to pay me money right now, and you're not going to get this thing probably until the next year, depending on supply chain and all that. But most people are pretty okay with that, right? We've kind of found that people are willing to pay up front for something that they know is going to be amazing, and also to support a creator.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing, well, the reason why most people do Kickstarter is because your project might not be able to exist unless you're getting this fundraising. And also, it's a really good way to gauge how much interest there is, because I really wasn't sure how many copies I would be printing of this game, and turns out it's going to be a lot more than I thought, which is amazing.
I know, it's exciting for everybody. A rising tide rises all ships. Like last week I talked with Society of Curiosities, who does something similar to what you do. It's similar, but still very different, right? Like it would be to a random passerby, it'd be like, oh, that's the exact same thing. It's like, no, it's really not. Like, it is very, very similar and very different. And in any other industry, they would be a competitor, but they're not, because it's like, what's going to be really great for us? Like, if more people get the Emerald Flame and love it, and then like they go through the Emerald Flame, and while they're waiting for you to build your next one, they're like, what can we do in between? And that's literally what happened to me. I went and I kickstarted Emerald Flame, and I'm like, cool. now I have to wait a year. Like, what do I do? And so I started looking around to try to find other things in the meantime to kind of, keep me busy and keep me excited. So it is really exciting. Just this whole community is just amazing. So basically what we're going to talk about, I want to talk about the Tale of Ord and your inspiration behind it, because that was the first one. Then the reaction you got to Tale of Ord, because it's pretty much a critical masterpiece. If you go on your website and you look at anybody who's ever played it, and like, spoiler alert, Ember Flame is kind of following the same path. Like, turns out you could do it again. But I'd love to hear about that and kind of the care you put into it, because this is something where it's your business and making money is awesome, but there's also a passion behind it that you can see. And I think passion's important, especially when it comes to something like this, which is a puzzle tale, which is just the best possible thing. Society of Curiosity said narrative puzzles, which is basically similar but different, but the same thing. So let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit about the Tale of Ord, how you started it, how you just went from 0 to 60. You just one day, I'm going to build this thing. Like, give me the background and kind of where it got you there.
Sure. So I used to work at an escape room before I started all of this, and at the time, there weren't really that many games of like puzzles in the mail kind of genre.
Yeah.
So I had played a couple, and I couldn't really find anything that really clicked with me. Like, it kind of felt like it was either too hard or too easy, or like very narrative focused with no puzzles, or just puzzles but no narrative. So I really set out to make the kind of game that I would want to play, which was sort of a middle ground between all of those things. And that's how Tale of Ord was born. And so basically when I left my work, I was like, I really like designing puzzles. What else can I do? And the answer was make a tabletop game. And yeah, so I just started working on it. And, when I set my mind on something happening, it usually ends up happening.
Oh, that's impressive. Really quickly, if you wouldn't mind tilting the camera down a little bit, I put a little question box in the bottom, and I don't know what the viewers can see or whatnot, but my dumb question is like cutting off half of your face.
I can see it in my computer screen, and the question is not there. So I think we might be the only ones who can see the questions.
Well, the question is, where do you find your inspiration? So this kind of ties into everything. You basically said you worked for an escape room. You saw a need in that. Obviously, people love escape rooms. Escape rooms are very popular for both just passive audiences and also the hardcore, like, want to figure out puzzles. And there definitely was a need that needed to be fulfilled. And so you realized, okay, cool, this needs to happen. I'm going to build it. Where did you begin? Like, how do you start from just nothing? Because my business is very much contingent on somebody reaches out and they fill out a huge survey about the person, and they're like, this is the area we're going to do it in, and I have all of these things to work with. It's statues and restaurants and whatnot. But you are just like, I need to fill this box with something. Like, how do you even start?
So for Tale of Ord, I started by thinking, just thinking about different themes or like potential stories that I could tell. And I wanted to do something different than the other things that I'd seen out there. So I was trying to think of a theme that I hadn't really seen covered in like mystery games or even in escape room games, which, there's a lot of themes that come up pretty frequently in escape rooms. Yeah. So I ended up landing on Norse mythology because I thought there was a lot to explore there.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen that theme done before. Yeah, and even since then, I've only played one escape room that was Norse mythology themed. And that was like a nice sort of coming home moment too, because they had like a puzzle that had the Yggdrasil tree, and I was like, I know exactly where all of these things go.
I've been prepared. I'm the one person that has been completely prepared for this very specific Norse-themed puzzle. Well, it speaks to me. I'm actually, I'm a huge Minnesota Vikings fan, which is like an offset of that because it's sports. But I did do a very loosely based Norse theme treasure hunt for somebody, and I did one for a. Man, if you really wanted to go, there's a liquor company called Highland Park, I think, and it's all Norse themed. Like their whiskeys are like Valkyrie and those types of like very. And so I did something based off that, but I remember I had to, because there are the Norse runes, which pretty much are like this one's this letter and this one's this letter, and they like left out V and U or
Not
like,
exactly, but
you can find ones that kind of do.
I know a little too much about this now.
I know. Okay, sorry. Correct me. How do the Norse runes work then, or at least
So, first of all, there are like in terms of if you look at actually a timeline of Norse runes, there are different sort of iterations of how they evolved through time. So you can kind of see, there might be 4 or 5 different alphabets which are very similar, but they have their own differences. And you're right that most letters translate as sort of a one-to-one, but there are some letters that might be kind of grouped into one rune. It might be like I and E are the same one or something like that.
It's so funny, me here having done like 45 minutes of research on like Norse runes. I'm like, this is how Norse runes are. And you're like, actually, like, aside from an actual scholar, I might be the most well-equipped to explain. Sure, I built like the entire like game, which I'm sure like hundreds of hours went into. That's fantastic. So Tale of Ord came out. Did you just have to like find reviewers and be like, please play my game? Like, will you please look at this? Like, how did that work? Because I go on your website. Yeah, I go on your website and I see all the reviews and everyone's like, holy crap, this is amazing. Like, get this game. And then of course I went on to try to find it after, I believe it was Juliana and Ariel who were like, yeah, you should play Tale of Ord. And I was like, cool, I'm going to get Tale of Ord. And then it's like completely sold out, potentially never to be made again, which that's going to be a whole nother conversation we're going to have later. Because like, I want it. So that you basically just sent this game to reviewers, and then how did you market? How did people find out about this? Like, how did Tale of Ord become this game where the people that I interview, who like for the most part are kind of the who's who of like this industry, are like, yeah, if there's one thing you want to do, it's play Tale of Ord.
Well, I mean, there were a couple reviewers that I was familiar with, like Room Escape Artist, which are like, that's the blog that you go to for any sort of escape room or tabletop escape game review, at least in North America. But then I pretty much looked for board game reviewers that had done reviews of other puzzle games. So even if it was something like an exit game that they had reviewed, at least I knew that they might have an interest in something like this. And Tale of Ord is a very long game, so it was not actually that easy to find reviewers because I had to be like, do you have 16 hours to review this? And a lot of people didn't. So,
oh my God.
yeah, but it was pretty much just like trying to find people that were interested, and people who are into that sort of thing would be excited to try something new.
Yeah, that is fantastic. Right, I'm bringing up another question, and this is going to be about the Emerald Flame. So I found out about the Emerald Flame, a mix because of your Instagram, but also because once I realized I wouldn't be able to get my hands on Tale of Ord, that this was the next one that was coming out. Went on Kickstarter. We talked a bit about this in the beginning, but went on Kickstarter and like did the like, track it when it opens it, I'll get an email. I got the email, and I think you're on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast. And so by the time I had gotten, like, I've woken up and like gotten my day started and got the email and got your website, it had already like hit its $30,000 goal in like the 3 hours. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I better do this as quickly as possible. So what has your response been, both in hitting your goal in 4 hours and then now multiplying the goal by 5 times, both emotionally and then also like logistically? Like how does that, what were the new problems that you have for this?
Well, I mean, emotionally, it's freaking amazing to see all this work, really pay off in that sort of way, and like see people be excited about the game, because I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited for everyone to play it. So it's nice to like be able to see that reflected. But yeah, logistically, it just means a lot of requoting the amounts of things that I'm ordering. But I'm working with people who seem to be really on top of like the manufacturing stuff, and we've already even started like doing a little bit of the sampling. So I think things are, you know, on track to go well, even if it ends up being manufacturing more.
Yeah. So that brings it to this other question that somebody had before. As you can see, I wrote a lot of these questions because I remember a bunch of the questions we had during the last one that Instagram deleted. Is it just you? Do you have a team of like dedicated people you hire? Do you have art? Like how much of it's you versus like hiring out pieces for like, you know, hiring out people for other pieces?
Mm-hmm. I would say it's about 90% me. My partner helps a lot with the narrative and the writing. We did a lot of the story development together, and the puzzles I pretty much worked on my own. And then there were a few pieces that I had, you know, friends or other people help with. Like, there's a chat feature in the game, so I don't know how to code. I had a very generous friend agree to make that part for me. And I didn't do like the box cover artwork. So that was something that I hired an artist for. And you can find her on Instagram. Her name is Liga Klavina, and she's amazing.
Should we spell that out? Liga Klavina, that seems like
it's Liiga Klavina.
Oh my God. Liiga
Klavina. Yeah.
Cool. I will give that a follow, and I'll see if I can post that in the notes once I post this too, because
it's also on the Kickstarter page. If anybody goes all the way to the bottom, it's there. But yeah, she's amazing, and I had this whole idea for a box cover, and I sent her a page with like a gazillion notes on it, because the box cover also has some puzzles in it. So I was kind of like, okay, this has to be exactly this and this way. And the result was like amazing. Just, it came out unbelievably.
Can you hold up the box cover? I know I'm going to be like, where are the puzzles? Like, I want to see it. That is so cool.
There's two puzzles in the cover, and there's another puzzle over here.
That is so. So are the puzzles part of the narrative, or are they kind of like little bonuses?
They're just for fun. I mean, I was like, I have to hide something in this box cover.
That is so flipping cool, though.
It wouldn't be right if I didn't do it, you know?
Well, you say that, but I can't imagine a lot of people would think about that kind of stuff, right? It goes to show you, and we talked about this on the phone a little bit, where like, this is a passion project, obviously, it's a business too, but there are people that are like, I want to have a, 50% profit margin on my business, and like numbers and percentages, and like, yes, that's a piece. And honestly, I bet having more people order might reduce the cost of things manufacturing wise, which is like, heck yes.
Well, which is why we can do like nicer things. So even though it reduces like the cost per unit, we're adding all this extra stretch goal stuff. So it ends up balancing out.
Yeah.
But I want to make nicer components because it'll just be prettier for people to handle.
There's something about presentation that is wildly important, and I harp on it a lot when I consult with people that are doing like immersive fun events, where it's like, dude, the difference between you printing something out on just like a white sheet of paper with like Times New Roman in 12 versus like even getting a different font and doing it on brown paper is like
absolutely
so amazing for the experience. But just having puzzles on the box where it's like, dude, I could spend like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes depending on how slow I am at puzzles, which after doing the Society of Curiosities, I've realized I am not great at puzzles and I need to up my game.
Well, these are meant to be very subtle, so it's not really something that I'm like, look at all the puzzles on the box. But if you're an observant person, you might be like, wait a second, this looks suspicious.
Why does this clock say exactly this? So is this, is that the same way where you reward observant people in-game as well? Is there kind of different ways to come to conclusions for different puzzles or different pieces? How does that work?
I think definitely observation is something that is rewarded in my puzzle design in general. But I mean, the game puzzles all have clues in them. So there is a certain starting point for you to kind of grab onto and think about what you're actually supposed to do with it. But a lot of the puzzles in the game are really visual. So it does take, more observation rather than like literal sort of an instruction following necessarily. So, you kind of want to look at it and like survey the whole page and notice what details are you seeing and like what connections can you make between the different things that are on the page.
Okay, cool. I've got another question here. And this is going to be specific to Emerald Flame because you had Norse mythology. Walk me through the Emerald Flame and what the inspiration is and how you got the inspiration. And then I have one more follow-up question after that, just about like how your brain works.
So Emerald Flame was born of me looking at a Wikipedia page of undeciphered ciphers, where I came across the Voynich manuscript, which is an incredible piece of sort of medieval alchemy slash botany slash astronomy. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's really
It
cool.
ends with
Go
a
check
Y.
it out. But yeah, and it was at some point in like found or purchased, transferred in the city of Prague. And I had been to Prague before. It's really beautiful, super interesting city. And I was planning on going back there actually while I was just starting to work on Emerald Flame. And so when I went there, I tried to get like a lot of photos, get a lot of source material, be like really observant of the environment and try to find, similarly to how you work in making adventures for people in person. I was like walking around and being like, oh, look at this symbol over here. This could be a puzzle.
Snap.
Yeah, exactly. That was me the whole trip. So it went from there. And then I looked at a lot of other medieval manuscripts and stuff. And a lot of the inspiration for the puzzles was visual, taking, sort of motifs or like just shapes from looking at those things. And the story changed a lot over time. One of the other early inspirations was actually the astronomical clock in Prague, which I can't remember if we talked about it last time, but it has this whole like legend apparently where like the person who made it for whoever was the ruler at the time, and there was like a rumor that they liked the clock so much that they didn't want any other city to have anything as nice as that, and so they sent like minions out to blind this clockmaker.
Oh my gosh.
And then the clockmaker in revenge broke the clock, which was then non-functional for like 100 years until somebody else fixed it. And that's an amazing like sort of folklore.
Oh my gosh.
So that's actually where it started. But then I kind of ended up going down the route of alchemy, and it just developed and changed. So it's not really part of the story anymore, but that's sort of where the inspiration came from.
That's so cool. And so it's like astronomical, like kind of clocks, devices, alchemy. It feels like it's in this whole world that's just very rich already. Like you've sampled from something where people have, I've seen puzzles with astronomy, right? Because you get the symbols and you get that. I've seen puzzles with that, but like not something like this kind of all encompassing. Like it just feels like it all fits together and it works so well. So that's actually going to bring me to my next question. As soon as this thing works. How do you overcome creative blocks? Or art blocks, because I'm sure you have that too. And then the follow-up question is, do you ever have ideas that are just kind of in the quiver where you're like, it's not going to work for the Emerald Flame, but like it might work for the next installment? Do you kind of have those inspirations and try to figure out how to fit them in, and how does that work?
I'll answer that one first.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of things that are kind of in the quiver, and if I come up with a random puzzle idea, then I'll just write it down, and I might come back to it eventually if there's a place where it makes sense for it to fit.
Yeah.
In Emerald Flame, there were a bunch of puzzles or sort of like small bits of puzzles that I liked the idea of, but they just didn't end up making it into the game because for whatever reason it didn't fit. So I ended up taking a lot of those and actually using them for the puzzles that I've been posting in the Kickstarter campaign. So, and there's a few points of inspiration where I was like, oh, I want to do this, but I also want to do this and this other thing with the same kind of motif. So one of those ended up in the game, and then I did two other like totally different puzzles from the same jumping off point that ended up being in the Kickstarter.
Oh, that's really cool.
And as for block, yeah, that's it's a tough question of how to overcome block. I've definitely sat at a desk and like wanted to bang my head against the wall when I couldn't think of something.
I
I
bet.
think like a good thing is usually like try to look for inspiration, try to read stuff,
Hmm.
and see if that kind of sparks anything.
Yeah.
Or if something's really not working, then just maybe try pivoting in a different direction, or taking a break and working on something else,
Yeah.
or taking a break and playing a different game.
Yeah.
And not, obviously not to like copy what you're playing, but I'll often play something and it'll give me a little bit of a spark to for something else, you know?
I'm trying to pay attention, but our cat Kiki is very, very excited about this, everything going on. Kiki, get down. Yeah, that's something, and I have the same thing too. All right, this is gonna be disastrous. All right, get down, girl. Okay, just sit there. I have the same problem too, where sometimes you want something to work. Whoa. All right, there, we've had enough of this. It's time to get down. Oh, all right. You want something to work, and then it just kind of doesn't work. Like you can't quite get it, and sometimes it works just puzzle-wise, but you can't figure out how to make it have the narrative work because everything needs to make sense. And nothing will be worse for a game than it's like alchemy and like astronomy, and now all of a sudden you're in like space age sci-fi, like because you really wanted to do this type of thing, and you just have to like shelf for the next one. I know that you're still really working on this. Do you have any idea or teaser of like what you're going to do next? You don't have to answer. I totally understand.
I do have things that I'm
Oh
going to
my
do next,
God.
but I'm not quite ready to tease them out yet.
I respect that. I'm very upset as the interviewer host. I want that soundbite, but that is okay. How long does the creative process take? How long did it take you to do Tale of Ord? How long did it take you to do Emerald Flame? And what do you think the timeline is going to be on your next project?
So those each took about 2 years of development, like just from starting from research and developing the puzzles, developing the narrative, and then doing playtesting and like
Hmm.
doing all the artwork and refining. Emerald Flame probably took a bit longer in a way because I was also fulfilling like Tale of Ward stuff as I was working on it. So
Yeah.
that took up a big chunk of my time while I was doing it. And also it has a lot more artwork than Tale of Ward does. So
Hmm.
that was also pretty time consuming. But I think the good news is that the next one will hopefully take less time.
Yeah.
So I can't say how long it will take, but
Yeah.
I do think it will take less than 2 years. So
Yeah, nothing's worse than being like, this is how long it's going to. I mean, you feel like George R. R. Martin's a great example where he writes these books and he's like, I'm going to have the next book out. And then he wakes up one day and he's like, dude, I just don't want to write right now. And like, he's like committed to this. So it is always tricky when you give yourself those self-imposed deadlines. All right, I'm going to completely change it up to a very, very hard-hitting, important question that is always important to me, but I have never asked. Do you
oh,
prefer pancakes?
absolutely waffles. No
Okay,
question.
okay, good. Because if you'd said pancakes, I would have just ended it right now and we would have just said it. Pancakes are basically just like boring waffles that you could do a lot less with.
Yeah.
And I should
And
say
not
that.
just waffles, but waffles with peanut butter and bananas.
Yeah, you got to have that. I like blueberries on my waffles, but yeah,
Also good.
you got to have that quick, hard hitting question. Okay, back to the actual real things. Here's a great question. Are your games replayable? For instance, if I was to purchase it and play it, can I gift it, or something where it's like I'm going to be marking all over this thing, or like, I see there's a candle in some of the things. I don't know if that's part of the promotion, if that's part of the game, but I would
It's
imagine.
part of the game.
Yeah, so it's like I would imagine that part you might have to purchase the candle, but is it possible to replay this game, or is it pretty much just like once you go through, you've gone through?
Well, once you've gone through, you've gone through. But
Yeah.
so it does have destructible components and some things that you want to write on. And that's just because I don't really like limiting what I can do if I have to like make sure that things are kept pristine. And I think it's really fun to be able to manipulate things, whether it's like, folding on something or drawing. And yeah, but the Emerald Flame does come with a refill kit because I know that people like to be able to pass on their games to somebody else. So So it comes with one replacement for everything that needs to be either written on or used up that cannot be used again.
That's
And
very
we actually
thoughtful.
also hit a stretch goal for Kickstarter backers to get an extra refill kit. So if you back it now rather than ordering it later, you're going to get two kits.
Wow, that seems like a great deal, which I have already done, and so has hundreds, if not thousands, of other people. Do you
Almost,
have?
yeah, we're at I think we're like 1,700-ish now.
That is insane. It's
Yeah.
so freaking cool. Oh God. Okay. And actually, I'm gonna to bring this other hard-hitting question from James from Australia. He's a puzzle maker. Why are we
James.
so
Hi,
cool?
James.
Yeah. And I think that kind of puts it in where I keep going back to this, and I'm in the same boat as you, where it's like, you know what's awesome? Eating food and like being able to afford rent and making money. But then there's also stuff that clearly you didn't have to do, right? A really good example is when you started just like blowing this Kickstarter go out of the water, and we're going to use the candle as a great example. So manufacturing 101, if I order 100 candles, they're going to be like 10 cents a piece. But if I order like 200 or 300 candles, they're going to be like 8 cents a piece. So you make more money. But instead of just like pocketing that, you've literally been like, you know what I can do? I can get more prizes for the people that purchase this. Like, that is really cool and really something. And it shows why you're so successful, because that kind of thought shines through, and it sets you apart from people that are clearly like, you've done things, you've bought products where you're like, okay, like this was almost worth the $20, right? Like, it seems like it's kind of, but this is the opposite, where you're just like, dude, I'm getting like a screaming deal with this. This is amazing. So what else makes you so cool?
What a question. I don't know how to answer
I love you,
that.
James. Okay, well, I can let you think about it if you'd like me to get another question. I know, this is a curveball. We figured we'd talk all about the Emerald Flame and all these things, but I'm asking you to brag about yourself, which could be really tough. But do you have anything else? Anything else you'd like to tell people?
I try not to do that too much. I will say that about what you were saying, with the stretch goals and stuff, it's like I just wanted to make the game its ideal version of itself, for people to experience. So if I can do that, then that's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, this one is one that I have because it's something I grapple with as well. How do you make sure a puzzle isn't too easy or too hard? How do you find that sweet spot, especially when so far you have 1,700 people have purchased this, but you're assuming what's the average group size that you recommend to play this game?
Up to 4.
Yeah, so if you're doing 1,700 times 4, I can't do math, but it's somewhere in like the 5,000s. That's a lot of different 4,000s. Oh, I don't know. That's a lot of people that you have to kind of factor in. And granted, they can work together, but what's your process to make sure A, it's not too easy or too hard, but also that it's fun? Because some puzzles like could be easy or hard, and you're just like, I kind of hate this.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a delicate balance, and it also, the way that you're designing it really depends on who your audience is. And at least at least from my starting point, my main audience was like escape room players and people who like at-home mysteries and that kind of stuff. And, and like I said in the beginning, I wanted to make a game that I would want to play. So I don't want to make something so difficult that is, gonna want to make you bang your head against the wall. But I do want to make something challenging that is going to make people feel really smart when they do solve it. And that's not going to, necessarily be obvious at first and maybe make you look at something in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
But they are challenging puzzles, and they're harder for some people than others.
Yeah.
But that's also why I provide a very detailed hint system. So if you ever get stuck, you can get like just a little nudge in the right direction. And sometimes that's really all it takes to kind of make something click and be like, oh, I just wasn't looking at this line over here. And now suddenly everything makes sense.
Or I was looking too much at this line and not at everything else, because that's what I tend to do.
Exactly. But I mean, playtesting is the biggest way to figure out if your things are too easy or too hard. And so part of that is playtesting with different groups of people. Some people might have more experience, some people will have less experience. So one of the questions is like, can the people who have less experience solve this and have an equal amount of fun as the people who have more experience solving puzzles. So if you have more experience or if you have a bigger group, you're probably going to go through it a little bit faster. And if you don't, then you might go through it a little bit slower, but that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a matter of gauging that balance. But I've had people play it who have played maybe like a couple escape rooms, but not necessarily are like super crazy puzzlers. And they were able to solve most of it with maybe only just a couple hints here and there, which is not the case for Tale of Ord. And I will say, like, Tale of Ord is a lot harder than
Tale of Ord,
Flame.
like, brutal.
And Emerald Flame is hard, but yeah, Tale of Ord's a little bit harder than I meant for it to be. And I think at the time I had, first of all, a different concept of like what was really hard. And I think I was making it with like more of a challenge in mind. Whereas making Emerald Flame, I really was trying to make it, like I wanted it to be more accessible to people and not so daunting. So it's also why it's a little bit shorter. Like Tale of Ord, depending on how many people you have, it could take like 3 to 5 hours per chapter, and it was 4 chapters. And this has been like 2 to 3, which is, I think, been a nicer. So it's a little shorter, and I've even had people be like, "Oh, this took us 3 hours, but they totally flew by." Which is awesome to hear.
Such a great thing. Yeah, I know. That's exactly what you want to hear. And it's tricky because you're competing with attention spans, and like our attention spans are now like 142 characters or less, right? Like somebody posts a paragraph and I'm like, I'm going to read the beginning and the end and not go there. And so the fact that you've created something, obviously that's thinking about the user and the player, but that the response has been like, okay, cool, it blew by and now we need more. It's just got to be such a great feeling. Like I can't tell you how excited I am to just that you're successful, but also just like the response has just been so great. So next question for me is if someone wanted to create their own tabletop style puzzle tale, which is I'm going to give you credit from now on because you're
credit to Matthew Stein from Enigmita for that one.
Okay, credit to Matthew Stein. I'm going to give credit to Matthew Stein. If somebody wanted to create something, one of my goals is to always inspire people to create little fun like treasure scavenger hunts. And so if you go on my YouTube channel, it's like, this is what this is. I just did one on the Polybius Square, which is like a way to encode messages. Mine are a little bit more like ciphers and decoding, which is almost more just kind of following directions than like actual puzzles because, you know, if I'm going to do a marriage proposal, I can't be like, well, it takes most people 15 minutes, but it takes 40% of people like an hour. So like, better hope that it's this. What would you recommend for somebody that just wants to create something from nothing? Like, where did you start from? Did you read up on things? I know that you worked in an escape room, so you already kind of had the brain for it. You're part of the community. What's the first step for people?
Play other games, first of all. Like, you can't like work in a vacuum, you know? So obviously don't do the same things that you're seeing other people doing, but it's really good to see what's out there. Because it's going to open your mind to a lot of things that you maybe wouldn't have thought of to begin with. And then, but like in terms of starting, audience and context are probably the most important things. So that's going to determine what kind of game you're making. For your city adventures kind of thing, like you don't want to make super meaty puzzles for it because people are also like, you know, they're going around the city. And I actually designed a game with Jan from Crux Club in New York here, which hopefully will be up soon. But as we're social distancing, it might be a little harder to play it, but it's an outdoor game. And so the way that we designed puzzles for that was very different than the way that I designed puzzles for a tabletop game because they're meant to be able to be solved on the fly. Like we didn't want anybody to spend more than 15 minutes at any given location. So because you got to keep people moving and you also want to keep like, you know, getting those little wins so that will keep you going. But that will determine like what kind of game you're making, how difficult are you going to make it, and then think about what kind of world you want to create. And is it going to have a story or is it just going to be puzzles? And if it's going to have a story, what kind of what things are going to be in that story that you can design puzzles around. So that's usually where I start in terms of puzzles. Like if I have a setting or a theme or a place, then I start doing research about that particular subject and try to use whatever things I find to make puzzles out of that. So, if you were going to do something about like medieval knights, maybe you have a puzzle that like is about swords or something like that. So that way you're also connecting your subject matter to the puzzles that you're making.
So it sounds like, to recap and please add in things that I may have forgotten, know the subject, like who is this for? Because for most people at home, they're going to build something. Their first iteration probably isn't going to be like, I'm going to try to get 1 million people to play this. It's like, no, I'm doing this for my husband, wife, kids, something like that. And then I know that you mentioned with the outdoor ones, make them a little bit easier, right? Because I think it may have been a lesson learned where you as the creator is like, oh, people are going to breeze through this. This is super easy. And then you give it to someone and they're just like,
it always starts out harder and it always gets easier through playtesting. But that's what playtesting is for. It's somebody is going to find the holes in your design, and then you have to figure out how to patch those holes to make sure that it makes sense to other people and not just in your own brain.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's actually all I have as far as questions. If anybody wants to add any more questions right now, otherwise we will begin to wrap up and chat a little bit about where to find. Can you show any of the pieces from the Emerald Flame? I know you have the box, but do you have any pieces like in?
I have. So actually, something which is not even on the Kickstarter page because I just started drawing it up is this little plant booklet I've got here. So
that's so cool.
This is a new piece, and nobody's even seen it yet. So
we're exclusive. I feel like such a journalist. I'm getting the exclusive scoop, and I'm going to keep like needling you about like what's the next theme going to be? Is it going to be this type of stuff? Or going to be this type of stuff? But my last little follow-up question before we talk about where people can find you. With the success of the Emerald Flame and everybody getting really excited about it, I'm sure that you've had other people, myself included, that are like, hey, is there any way you could do like a second edition of like the Tale of Ord for all the people that just
That's my most asked question in the past 2 weeks.
I know.
For sure.
So has there been any thought to like once the whole Emerald Flame thing happens, maybe in between that, have you thought about re-releasing? Because there is something really cool about the scarcity, right? Like, oh, I missed it, and that kind of sucks, like, but it also makes me want it real bad, and it made me jump on the Emerald Flame as quickly as possible, because my guess is it would, the Emerald Flame was going to follow the same suit, where it's like once you're done, you're working on the next one, you're focusing on the next one. But have you given any thought to maybe doing like a limited edition, like Tale of Ord re-release for like the people that have now discovered you and want to play your games?
Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility, but the Tale of Ord was really designed in a way that like makes it impossible to manufacture, and I don't know that I have it in me to make more of them, because it was just really like a difficult and arduous process.
I understand.
So if I was going to make more, I'd probably want to find a way to have it made, and doing that would require redesigning some portions of the game. So if I were to do it, it would be more like a second edition rather than like a remake.
Yeah.
But then it's like if I'm redesigning some parts of the game for manufacturing, then maybe I should redesign some of the puzzles, because
and then you're basically building a new game.
I mean, it wouldn't be, obviously it's not the same as starting from scratch, but like I said, it's a really challenging game, and I think that like the Emerald Flame flows much more smoothly and is, overall more fun, just because it has less sort of points of frustration. Yeah. So if I were going to do it again, I would probably want to find a way to like smooth out some of those points of frustration so that it would actually just be more fun for a larger audience.
I was going to say, just from like the business owner standpoint, like you should consider making like 10 to 20 and like auctioning them off for like a much higher, but then you could like give some of the proceeds to, like a cause. It could be kind of a cool thing. I say this because like, I want any opportunity I can to like throw money at you and get the Tale of Ord to try it out. And I so much respect that. And I understand it's kind of like, people that do coding, where they're at coding, software websites, like if you change like one letter here, all of a sudden the whole thing falls apart and you need to fix this and this and this and this and this. And so in order to make it manufacture, you have to change this. And the moment this changes, you have to alter this and then change this. Then you're like, well, while we're at it, let's smooth this out. And so I do understand always looking forward and being like, well, Tilavoid was great. Emerald Flame is going really well. Like, let's just do the next thing and take a step forward instead of kind of a half step back. So I absolutely understand that. So final question. Where can people follow you? Where can they find out more? What should they be doing? What's the best thing that people could do right now?
Well, you can follow me on Instagram at PostCurious, Twitter at GetPostCurious, and the website is also getpostcurious.com. You can sign up for the newsletter. I send out one every month with updates, but also with like whatever blog posts are up and like a game spotlight with other creators that are doing kind of similar things, because I like to support other creators, because just the more great games that we have out there, the better it is for everyone. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it.
And the Kickstarter, if I just go on Kickstarter and type in Post Curious or the Emerald Flame, I can
You should be able
it.
to find it if you type in the Emerald Flame. You can also go to bit.ly/emeraldks, and that will get you there as well.
Try to put all these things in the notes, assuming that Instagram decides that it wants to play ball. Oh, please. We just talked
really
for 48
so.
minutes. I know. If it doesn't, like, I'm just
going to
If it doesn't,
it means that it just hates me. It's not you.
I know, right? It's just like the one time. No, it'll be fine. Knock on wood. I'm an optimist. It will be great. So last little question with that. The Kickstarter ends in 2 or 3 days?
No, it ends in like 13 days.
13 days.
Yeah.
2 or 3.
It ends on the 26th.
Okay. And once it ends, it's still available to order, but you lose out on those like stretch goals. I know you had like an enamel pins, right? You had just some cool. Do you have any of those on hand?
No, they haven't been made yet.
So yeah.
They're just designs right now, but
that looks so cool.
But I'm really excited for those because I've never made an enamel pin before.
Yeah, they are. I have a ton of pins and I love them. I need to go back and see if I've back the one where I get the pin, because it's like, why wouldn't I? I could put it on one of the many backpacks and bags I have when I travel. So, Rita, thank you so much for doing this second one. Thank you for the
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, this is great. I will eventually be out in New York and we'll have to get together. And if you want me to play your game,
absolutely.
I absolutely will. And I am a huge fan of you and your work and everything. And thank you so much. And you have a wonderful weekend and best of luck with the insanity that is the reaction you've gotten to this, because I am just so excited.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.